The Vipskaya upland is located in the European part of Russia, between St. Petersburg and Murmansk, but it is one of the least densely populated areas in the country. There are thousands of square kilometers of swamps. According to official statistics, up to 10 people a year disappear here, but the area is popular with tourists. If you know where to go, the fishing and hunting here is wonderful. For almost 20 years Alexander Klokov from St. Petersburg and his friends went hunting in this wilderness in spring. They went this year in April as well. The company is respectable and substantial, 3 large managers of St. Petersburg Enterprises, a writer, a retired FSB officer and a retired army colonel. The VIP tourists came for cultural rest. Some came to hunt, some came to fish, some came simply to wander through the woods with a video camera, and some came simply to sit around a campfire in the evening. According to witnesses, on the third day Alexander Klokov did not return to the hunting cabin, where all the members of the company lived, in the evening. Klokov was an experienced hunter, and the witnesses were not particularly worried about him, deciding that he would spend the night in the woods and appear in the morning. When he did not show up the next day, the witnesses organized a search. Another day later, they contacted the Kapsha police station by satellite phone. From the criminal case on the disappearance of A.P. Klokov, 12.5 people searched for Klokov for 7 days. They lined up in lines at 10-meter intervals and combed the taiga, swamps, and spruce-covered fields of the local village, deserted back in Soviet times. The man was found dead in a ravine 5 kilometers from the hut where the tourists stayed. They found the body and were stunned. The man was completely naked. Next to him on the stump were his pants and shirt neatly rolled up. No shoes. No jacket either. The loaded carbine was leaned against a tree. Why the dead man undressed before he died is a mystery to investigators. For 8 to 9 days when Klokov lay in the taiga, his corpse was badly nibbled by wolves. But the examination showed, the body was really Klokov's. The relatives also identified the sports pants and the shirt. The cause of death could not be exactly determined, whether the heart stopped, or he died of hypothermia, or maybe both at once. But why take his clothes off? Klokov decided to go for a swim? At 5 degrees Celsius? Not to mention the lack of water nearby. While the police were dealing with a mysterious case, the long-awaited May holidays came. Residents of St. Petersburg rushed en masse to the nature. And about 30 kilometers from the place where Klokov died, settled a company of fishermen. These people were also experienced. 5 men aged from 32 to 47 years. The chief of Kapshinsky police station, Anatoly Boytsov, told.
In the evening the company was sitting around a campfire. Mikhail Izaev, 35, got up abruptly and, without saying anything, walked quickly away from the lake in the direction of the forest. They called his name, but he had already disappeared in the dark. They thought, the man had to pee. About an hour later they got worried. Shouted. They went to a nearby village. It is also uninhabited, only cottagers come on weekends, no guy. The next day they searched for him on their own. And they seem to have found him. One of Izaev's friends claims he saw him from a distance. He started screaming and calling, but Izaev looked into the forest, as if he was being beckoned from there, and ran away again. It was not until the next evening that the fishermen contacted us. Again we had to comb the area, but this time without success. A local hunter found the body 2 months later. The body had been eaten by a bear, but experts concluded that the predator had eaten the already deceased corpse. As in the case of Klokov, the dead man was also found naked. Even his shoes and socks were missing. The police specifically searched the neighborhood for Izaev's clothes. But they never found anything.
There was another accident. This time, they found the naked body of a local resident. A 30-year-old Russian-Swedish lumberjack who went home to the village in the evening after his shift. The body was found in the morning, 200 meters away from the hut in the rut of the forest road. Overalls, boots, shirt were scattered over a long distance. It was as if the guy was running, throwing off his clothes as he went. It looked like he had already gone far away, but for some unknown reason decided to come back. There was no trace of alcohol or drugs in his blood. It was determined he died by strangulation. The lumberjack's mouth, nose and throat were clogged with liquid road dirt. There was dirt under his fingernails as well. In the report there are the following statements from eyewitnesses. It seemed as if he was picking at the ground and eating dirt with his hands. The local sheriff, already mentioned head of the Kapshinsky Police Department Anatoly Alexandrovich Boytsov, A native local resident, of Eps by nationality, understands the unreality of what is happening best of all.
In our forest, people don't undress for no reason. You can't go naked, you can cut your entire body with branches. And mosquitoes and gnats can bite you. It looks like it's not a criminal act after all. I got the impression that the victims were going crazy before they died. It seemed to them that it had gotten hot, they had obviously torn their clothes off themselves. But what was the reason for that? I don't understand. I can admit that the city people were confused in the woods and panicked. But for the locals to die so strangely.
They say that some hallucinogenic mushrooms grow near St. Petersburg, a favorite delicacy of drug addicts. Maybe there's something here, too?
Nonsense. Our people specialize in vodka. Besides, the bodies were taken to Tikhvin for examination. By the way, here's another case. Last fall a 60-year-old elementary school teacher of our village died. She did not come to school in the morning. We started to look for her. We found her the same day in the swamp behind the village. We could see that she was coming from the forest. She went off the well-trodden path, as though somebody called her again, waded across the brook, sat down in the moss, and died. Her shoes were gone, too, barefoot footprints in the creek. She had a gold ring on her finger and a chain around her neck. An elderly, well-respected teacher. Do you think she also swallowed junky mushrooms? She could not have eaten them by mistake, she's a local.
Boyts have reported the unusual cases to the Tikhvin District Police Department and the local prosecutor's office. Since there were no obvious signs of a crime, the case was closed. The actions of the village sheriff, combing the wood, working with witnesses and compiling reports, were deemed competent. All the more so since similar incidents occurred not only in the territory of the Kapsha police station alone, but in other places in the area. This was definitely stated by one of the oldest workers of the local prosecutor's office, who asked to remain anonymous. Boyts have also mentioned the same thing.
I've been working for the local police since 1988,
he said.
I vaguely remember there being some talk of such deaths. It turned out that way. Not only in my area, but in the surrounding area as well. 16 cases of naked corpses were documented, another half dozen or 2 dozen cases were under suspicion.
1993. In the fall, the corpse of a sawmill keeper was found. The corpse, naked. Clothes were nearby, thrown off in a pile. Shirt buttons were blown off to the sides, as if the man was throwing it off in a hurry, without unbuttoning it completely. The cause of death was not established by experts, they explained it with the fact that his heart was palpitating. At the end of the 1990s there were 2 accidents in 1 month. Local people went berry picking and did not return. And again, autopsies showed that there were no signs of violent death and alcohol content was minimal. 2001. 2 locals went out in the fall for cranberries on the marshes. They split up. One did not return. 2 days later they found the body. Berries scattered. Clothes were folded in a basket. The same year, at the end of October, a corpse of a mushroom garden keeper was found. He was sitting on a stump barefoot, mushrooms were piled out of the basket. Boots and socks neatly put beside him. Last tragedy happened in September of this year. 100 meters from the highway, mushroom hunters found the body of a resident of one of the local villages, Alexander Prokhorov. As has become customary, in his underwear. Pants and a sweater were lying around. The police had a theory that he was hit by a car and then the driver dragged the body into the woods. But the experts showed that the bones were intact. There were no signs of bodily trauma resulting in death. Before making hypotheses, it is necessary to gather all the information and try to analyze it. That's what we did with the help of Anatoly Boytsev. 1. There is no earlier information, the cases were not considered criminal and did not stay in the archives. But we do know that since 1993, 16 nude or partially nude corpses without traces of violence were found. And this is in an area with a population of only 5,000 people. In the summer, tourists and vacationers add another 1,000 or 1,500. 2. All the bodies were found in a small area with a radius of 50 kilometers. This is the Bear's Corner, 300 kilometers away from St. Petersburg. 3. Of the 16 dead, only 3 were people from St. Petersburg. The rest were locals. 4. 2 women were killed. The rest were men, aged 25 to 60. 5. A version of robbery was ruled out. Some of the victims had wallets on their clothes and jewelry on their bodies. 6. All deaths occurred between April and October. The weather was relatively warm. According to Boytsov, people also disappear in winter in these places. At this time of the year though, corpses were found in classic poses common for victims of hypothermia. Before they die, the stranded people wrap themselves in fur coats and sheepskin coats. No nudity. 7. Some carefully remove their clothes and fold them. Others tear them off in a hurry.
I think it's scientists, not criminologists, who should be looking for a clue.
Boytsov told us in the end.
There is a certain devilry in all these cases, but you'd be better off talking about it with the locals, not the authorities.
Excerpts from protocols of these strange cases. 1. About the elderly teacher whose body was found in the swamp last autumn. The woman had lost her boots and stockings.
I do not know how Anna Maslova ended up in this area. Knowing Maslova N.A. well, I completely exclude any violent actions against her.
Testimony of a colleague of the deceased village school teacher. 2. About the Russian-Swedish logger, who choked with mud.
A man's corpse is lying face down. He looks 25 to 30 years old, with his head to the west. There are no clothes on the corpse.
Direct speech. Yevgeny Gerasimov, Chief of Precinct Commissioners of the Department of Internal Affairs of the Tikhvin district.
Every year we find 1 or 2 naked bodies. The cause of death is hypothermia. But it is possible that there are many more similar cases. Every year up to 10 people go missing in the Tikhvin swamps. It is impossible to find all the bodies. Maybe they drowned in the swamps or were mauled by a bear. What if they are also naked somewhere?
Since 1993, there have been 16 mysterious deaths on a small patch on the Vipskaya upland. The people disappear here by the dozens, it's just that not all bodies can be found. So, it is possible that the eerie statistics suggest many more examples. Let's assume that people have been murdered for years on end after all, but for what purpose does the perpetrator or perpetrators strip them without stealing anything? A serial killer? Maniac? One might think of a madman who specializes in villagers, usually of a very advanced age. The intervals between the crimes do not fit in, and the unpredictability of the meetings, well, how can one know in advance where in the deep woods the encounter could happen? This is not a recreational park, with very few people, and the only connection with civilization is along the one forest path. Local Sheriff Boytsov offered us to talk to the locals, although he refused to say what he had in mind. They would tell us themselves, he said. We talked. We walked through the schools, markets and stores in the 3 settlements. The villagers had only one version of what was happening. But it is so improbable that we will keep quiet about it for the time being. Later, when we returned from Tikhvin to Moscow, we told Sergei Nikitin, an expert of the highest category at the Moscow Bureau of Forensic Medicine, about the mysterious deaths. He noted the following regularities. People die between April and October. There are no signs of violent death. Before death, victims lose their minds, at least they do irrational things, undress naked, eat dirt, throw away the mushrooms and berries they picked, and put their clothes in baskets or scatter them in the woods. Sergei Alexeyevich, can you offer your version?
I will try, but I warn you, I do not believe in mysticism, and I believe that it is possible to solve any crime, should the desire and appropriate technical capabilities be present. First of all, if we assume that all 16 deaths, when people were found naked, are connected by one chain, then the accidents have a clear seasonal character. All of the tragedies occurred in above freezing temperatures. This in no way contradicts the fact that people die of hypothermia. If the body temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius, the fatal outcome is practically guaranteed. Homeless people freeze to death in the center of Moscow in the summer. The second question is, why did people throw off their clothes? It is a common point in all cases. It looks like they were really hot at first. Then the contact of the hot body with the cold may have caused a spasm of the skin vessels. The blood flow and heat release slowed down. The skin cools down a lot, but the internal organs, on the contrary, heat up, increase. In this case, a person suffering from fever will die faster than a healthy person from temperature shock. Again, this does not contradict the fact that all those who died were diagnosed with hypothermia. Finally, there is lunacy before death. And this could be a consequence of extreme heat. Or vice versa, something got into people's bodies, which caused fever and glitches and intensified the delirium.
But the case of the lumberjack, why did he eat dirt before he died?
Who told you he ate it? Maybe the guy had a high fever and was thirsty. Ran back to the plot where there was water. But he didn't have the strength, so he fell down and started sucking water out of the dirt. It is also not strange that some people put their clothes in baskets before they die. Where else was there to put them? Those who didn't control themselves at all threw things around chaotically. The rest, though they undressed, tried to keep their clothes. On the basis of the available data, I can conclude that a certain toxin entered the human body, causing a strong increase in temperature and a blurring of the mind. Given the seasonality of what was happening, warm spring, summer, early fall, we can assume that all of the victims were affected by some kind of animal or plant poison. They smelled a wrong flower, ate a poisonous mushroom or got bitten by a snake. But on the other hand, probably all local poisons are known to specialists. And in this case there shouldn't be any mystery.
But traces of toxin poisoning was not found by the expertise.
Maybe they just didn't know what to look for. I don't want to offend my colleagues, but not all forensic laboratories in our country are equipped with the latest technology.
Expert Nikitin offered two versions, poisonous odors and snake bites. Let's deal with the plants.
First of all, marsh rosemary arouses suspicion,
says Sergei Trifonovich, a native of these places and a senior researcher at the Research Institute of Pharmacology, Doctor of Biological Sciences.
This plant covers swamps as a carpet and secretes essential oils with intoxicating effect. I have experienced their effect. By the end of the day spent in the swamps, my legs feel dizzy and woozy. The second variant is poisonous mushrooms, which victims have carelessly eaten. The rosemary can be found in Siberian bogs, in Transbaikalia, and in the Middle Belt, but reports of naked corpses from other places are unknown. We cannot even talk seriously about mushrooms. Rural people are extremely conservative about mushrooms. They collect only species they know from their childhood, which is fortunate that there are no problems with them in the taiga. No, I do not think that some plants in the northwest of Russia can cause such a poisonous effect. After all, we do not live in the Amazon jungle.
Only one reasonable version remains, snake bites. Experts believe that in the north of the Leningrad region there is one known poisonous snake, the common viper, but its bite does not cause feelings of heat. There are harmless snakes and copperworts, legless lizards, spindle lizards, etc. These are all creepies said to occupy these places, but the natives are sure that the list is not complete. They speak that the swamps of northwest Russia inhabits a species of snakes unknown to scientists so far, different from all the others.
Back in the 1980s, we were informed about some flying snakes inhabiting our swamp.
Alla Titova, Tikvin Local History, ex-director of the Ethnographic Department of the Natural Park Vipsky Forest told us.
Their bite seems to be deadly. I started digging through the literature, asking questions to the old-timers. And it turned out that the flying creep in the opinion of local inhabitants is a dangerous, but quite ordinary animal. They tell about meeting with it in the same way as, for example, about observing bears or even a wood grouse.
Cryptozoologists, amateurs from the Labyrinth Research Society, who have been conducting a total survey in the villages of the Tikvin district for several years in a row, are also confident in the existence of these mythical flying reptiles.
These snakes have a bizarre appearance,
states a full member of the Russian Geographical Society and an activist of Labyrinth, Ilya Gopov.
At least, the head of males has a growth resembling a rooster's comb. Their behavior is very unusual. According to witnesses, the miracle snakes are capable of half jumps and half flights, from the ground to several meters, and from trees, on which these creatures willingly climb, to dozens. That's why they got the nickname flying creepers. There is nothing really supernatural in existence of such species. Boundless bogs may hide more than one species unknown to science. It's not the well-trodden Loch Ness. And the ecological analog of the Russian flying creeper is known, the palm snake of Indonesia. It is capable of making planing jumps, retracting its belly and spreading its ribs. And naked corpses. By the way, we were the first to associate with these snakes. The locals have handed down from generation to generation a safety technique when encountering them. which boils down to 2 rules. The first, if the snake jumps on you, run not straight ahead, but to the side, zigzagging. Is quite logical. It is clear that in the air a flying creep cannot change the direction. But the second recommendation is not for the faint-hearted. Here is what is written in the collection of L.S. Vasil Jeff Tikvin stories about snakes. Experience of the Commentary/Tikvin Folklore Archive. Research and Materials, SBB, 2000. If it, a flying creeper, will rush, tear off something of your clothes and throw to it. While it's busy with the rag, you keep running. When the flying creep realizes his mistake and starts chasing you again, throw another thing. I've seen people come running out of the woods naked, tearing everything off themselves. It is clear,
continues the cryptozoologist,
that the described behavior of snakes, like almost brainless reptiles, contradicts all the canons. No known species possesses such behavior. Well, to chase a man away from his sight, that's alright, but to pursue, there is no biological expediency. But the plot, you must agree, is familiar, to tear off his clothes. Assuming that in folklore, as often happens, cause and effect are confused, everything falls into place.
The only documented case of catching such a snake was in 1942. The soldiers of Lieutenant General of Losev's army, at that time not yet a traitor to the motherland, captured the flying creeper and kept it in a wooden barrel. There is an archive record of how it was planned to give the snake to Leningrad scientists. But serious battles began, and the flying creeper was forgotten. After World War II, according to local residents, the mysterious snakes almost disappeared. They started to treat forests with herbicides to weed out low-value species like birch and aspen, leaving only conifers. It turned out as usual. Old people gloomily recollect that even frogs were bred in the forests in those years. But after the collapse of the USSR, the life in the forest started to improve, so the snakes allegedly have been restoring their population. Whether or not a flying snake really exists is unknown to science, but there are people who died in a mysterious way. It is difficult to think of any other reasonable explanation for the mysterious chain of deaths. There isn't, and probably will never be, any evidence for the snake version. Corpses can lie in the woods for weeks and months before they are discovered. And who knows how long the venom of flying creepers can be isolated by laboratory means. If such critters really do exist and are actively breeding, there will be more and more mysterious deaths. But for now we can relax. Winter is coming, the reptiles will go into hibernation.